is the new firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behaviors so you won't click. No complicated code, just tried and true brain science at play. Social engineering for good, the best defense is in your mind today.
Welcome to Phishing for Answers. The opinions expressed here are solely those of the individuals involved and do not reflect the views of their employers. Get ready, because the next live episode of Phishing for Answers is starting right now with your host, Joshua Crumbaugh, the CEO of Phish Firewall.
Psychology is the new firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behavior so you won't click.
All right. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Phishing for Answers. Today, we're here with Pete Gibson. Pete, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Joshua. Pete Gibson, the CIO at Alamo National, CIO at Wyndham Hotel Group, ran an outsourcing company in Shanghai, and just got done being CIO at Friendly's and Johnny Rockets. And before that, I did major programs in the government. So
Very cool. That's a lot of retail. I imagine you've seen. I mean, retail just has a whole different set of threats than the traditional business. Or I guess you've got things like QR codes you have to train your staff about, because I've seen a lot of times where they'll go and put little stickers on top of your own QR codes internally. You've got all of the many social engineering attacks that are going to hit them. So yeah, I think this will be very interesting.
good.
So how'd you get into technology to begin with?
It was really fortunate. I was a liberal arts major in school. Came out and eventually joined the Navy, and in the Navy's infinite wisdom, they said, we're going to make you electronic warfare officer. So here's this liberal arts major studying, at that time, the Soviet Navy and networking and how to defeat people in the electromagnetic spectrum. Rose on up through the ranks, did well, and my last position was I was responsible for the U.S. Navy's Tomahawk cruise missile program, the weapon system side of it. So we developed, and we were the first commercial off-the-shelf, COTS, government off-the-shelf weapon system that was certified. So it was an interesting experience, to say the least. And for me, it was a great learning experience, because as a naval officer, you move every 2 to 3 years. But when I was in this place as a 36-year-old lieutenant commander, I had 350 civil servants working for me. And they were some of the brightest in the Navy as far as coding. And I learned how to develop defect-free code, because we believed not. We were a CMM organization, but we were believe high in software quality assurance. So I learned that. I learned system engineering, learned project and program management. And in that, I couldn't really do a whole lot as an officer, because these guys had it in spades. Modeling and simulation, had a 10-person math team and so forth. But I was able to grow the program by internal sales to the Navy. So I was able to get other capabilities, because we were truly open architected system from software all the way up to the hardware side of it. And so I could bring out capabilities. And so we did. We sold capabilities, and I was able to go grow that program. So
Sounds exciting. Yeah, not, I imagine, a typical course for most liberal arts majors. That seems
absolutely.
unique.
Yeah, but I will also, and people all, they look at the resume and they go, oh, that's pretty impressive. Oh, in school, you were a human relations major. And I kind of go, yeah. And I would tell you that was probably an extremely good major to have. Not so much the technical side of human relations, but as I say, folks, that could I go in, I do turnarounds. I get in some really tough business situations. We got to turn the company around. And people often ask, "What, how do you do it? You do this, you do that." I said, the major thing is leadership, being able to lead people through change, and
Yep.
basically get them to do things they wouldn't normally do. And when I speak, I said, systems don't build themselves, systems don't repair themselves. It's really, technology is a people game. And
It
that
is.
has served me really well. So I've done 3 bankruptcies, taking companies through that. The first one I had about a 92% retention rate. Second one I had a 96% retention rate, and the last one I had a 100% retention rate in taking my team through bankruptcy. And it's
Wow.
about treating people right, fairly, and not coddling. Don't say that, but it's about treating them right, recognizing they got families, recognizing they have career aspirations and dreams, all those type things, and having just treating them right in a good environment to where they can excel. And people stick around to that. I mean, you read it all the time, right? People leave due to bad managers. Well, let's be a good
They
manager.
stay for good managers too. Yeah,
Right. That's right.
absolutely. So what are you up to these days?
I'm consulting. I'm consulting a lot in security, believe it or not. So I go into private equity groups, and then I help them with our portfolio companies, either in the portfolio companies adding value to, or the technology piece of it, adding value to the company to increase the valuation of it, and to protect their brand from a really greatly improving cyber threat.
Yeah. I mean, as a founder myself, I can only imagine for those founders that don't understand cybersecurity that how difficult it must be because particularly if you've just gotten venture funding, the last thing on your mind is probably cybersecurity, and it's not a bad thing. It's just you've got a million other things that you have to worry about, and so I know about cybersecurity, and the struggle was even real there, personally. But I could see that somebody that doesn't know anything about cybersecurity, how it would probably largely get ignored often in a typical startup. Am I right?
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. Um, so at Friendly's, they had not invested in technology since 2003, and they used to call
Like any
me
technology.
any technology because they were
Oh,
basically a bankrupt company, and so they didn't have the money to invest. And it's not like because they didn't want to; it's because they just didn't have the funds. And so when you got in there and started looking around, you kind of go, oh, "This is a risk waiting to happen." And so as a technology leader, you kind of got to politely evangelize your situation that you are in. And so I'd go in and say, yep, we are extremely vulnerable in this area and so forth. And I would evangelize. And my peers, the head of operations and HR, and the CFO, they always say, and they used to call me the Death Star because I would come in and say how bad it was. And but that kind of, and you don't win those. I'll just be honest with you. You go in as bad, and there still may not be money for you to win it. But we got hacked in a really tough way, and you're kind of glad that you evangelized along the way, saying we were vulnerable. And as compared to, I see a lot of CIOs and CISOs, they kind of they mitigate it, they sweep it underneath the rug, and then when it bites, it catches the entire executive team off guard. And
yeah,
it's a really bad situation. At least if they know about it, the CEO, CFO, and all these folks, they have an understanding. And again, they may not
yeah.
be able to solve it because in those cases, they're trying to save the company. But at least when it happens, they are prepared for it.
Well, and I mean, you're not in the whether you're a CISO or a CIO, you're not in that position for sweeping things under the rug. I mean, I would imagine, at least personally, everyone I have in a position of leadership, one of the key reasons I have them there is because they'll tell it to me exactly how it is,
Right.
and that's an important element. I know that, people can be intimidated and sometimes not wanna tell you the bad news, but you have to have the bad news,
Right.
along with the good news, so that you can react and make informed decisions.
Yeah. And you don't have to do it when you do it. You don't have to do it. Oh, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. If I don't have this, we're gonna go whatever. But you just really have got to be able to send a clear and consistent message. And
Yeah.
how do you do it to a board or whoever it is without being the Chicken Little, the sky is falling and losing your credibility? And one of the things that I do is I go in there and say, here are best practice standards. And then this is where we stand up next to it in a heat map. They're smart people. And so you go, oh, there's a lot of red there. And you kind of go, yeah, we got some work to go do. Right. But we're good over here. But they get it. I mean, they kind of know, oh, we're vulnerable. And I said, well, as soon as we can get some capital, we need to go. My first step would be this, and we go do this and help protect us. And my time being, we're going to do X, Y, Z. That if it does happen, we can mitigate it and so forth. And they kind of go, okay. They know that you're trying, but everyone understands the situation. I mean, the other side of it, operations needs money too. CFO doesn't have enough funds sometimes. So you still got to work together as an executive team. But to your point, and you're spot on, is you got to get the situation. You kind of politely got to get your needs on the table.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's a lot that can be done without huge investments too, from a cybersecurity perspective. One of the things that I'm always harping on is just hardening your systems, hardening your people. Those are two things that can be done very easily that really mitigate a lot of threats. I mean, I hear people worried about, talking about the 0-day threats, but they're not hardening their systems, which would prevent most 0-day threats from even being successful.
That's
And,
correct.
uh, and so I think it starts with just really good hygiene. And that hygiene is not just when it comes to our systems, it has to continue over into our people as well.
That's correct. And simple things like, what is your network infrastructure? How well segmented are you that everything goes through the firewall? Like, so your internal, so how well segmented, what are your subnetting philosophy and so forth? And so
My
we did,
experience, they're not segmented. I've been a pen tester. No, no
that's right.
one's segmented.
That's right. And to your point, you're spot on. It's really easy to go do. One of the ones that I like is real simple, is just training, because I don't care how good you are. The threat is so sophisticated that if you're not training, you're probably going to have issues, because it's going to be well beyond what your team can go do. And so, yeah, and I'm pretty open about it. We got hacked at Friendlies, and how they get in, I'll tell you, they sent into the accounts payable mailbox. They sent an email, and they made it look like it was a invoice for services or something. And of course, they zipped the invoice up so that when it came through the email inspection, which was kind of old, it couldn't unzip it and take a look at it. And in the body of the message, they put a username and password. So what does the accounts payable clerk do? Well, it does what an accounts payable clerk should do. Open it up, see what it is, try to get it into the system to get it processed. Boom. And of course, it was came in, and then the package got in. And of course, the package didn't spawn for the 30 days later. And of course, it's 10 o'clock on a Friday night when people aren't around and so forth. But because of the
Mhm.
network segmenting, they only got 12 servers. And because at that time IT was doing well and we did have some capital, I was halfway through and I'm not going to be, I know we want to be agnostic here, but we had newer servers in place that would snap every 5 minutes. And so we could take a look at when the package came in, and you could examine the package, and we had half our infrastructure back up and online within minutes. The other one was still on the old stuff, and we had to do tape restore. Good
Oh,
news is
wow.
we were able to work our way out of it. We did not pay ransom. I did not pay Bitcoin or any of the other things. It was back to your point. With what we had, we could use it and we were somewhat prepared. Now, it took us some work. I'll be honest with you. There are some dark moments when you go through it, but it takes strong leadership.
Late
It
nights.
takes understanding what's going on and so forth to get the organization out of it. It was hilarious. We think we got some ransomware in. CFO goes, oh, CEO go, oh, and you have to go to them and say, you still got a business. They are not even close to the revenue stream. They just got some reporting servers.
Yep.
And if you're not doing this, everyone said, oh, ransomware is bad, and it is bad. But conversely, though, is you got to be prepared for it, and then you have got to be able to handle the challenge of the situation. If you can't, you're going to get all types of help. And they're going to come back there. What is this? What about that? What are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? And so forth. If you need to be able to run the situation. You're going to
Yep.
have all types of lawyers there helping you. You're going to have your lawyers. You're going to have your cybersecurity lawyers because they don't want to pay you. Actually, they want the money for cybersecurity insurance, but when it comes time to paying out, they want to make sure they will have their cyber guys in there. And we have some. They brought in some good guys, and that was actually good. And then you got to get the PII guys in, or how much, the personal stuff going out. Yeah, and so I had a team every afternoon. My 4 o'clock call was about 6 or 7 lawyers from different organizations. This is what we're doing. This is where we're at. This is what we're doing. They said, do you want to negotiate with these guys? And I said, what happens when you negotiate? You normally end up paying. Well, we ain't going to go do that, guys, because we ain't going to pay. And you just got to be able to work your way out of it. But the
And
threat
I mean,
is
it
really
starts with
daunting.
planning too, and knowing
It
what
does.
you're gonna do if that happens, knowing where your sensitive information is, to your point.
Yeah.
You have to know where those things are, and I think there's a lot of times where we don't have a good enough handle on where our sensitive information is. Maybe the structured, but not the unstructured data,
Oh, yeah.
and that's what can lead to, uh more impactful,
No,
incidents,
you're right.
and, I mean, we've all seen them. We've seen them play out in the news, in fact, where, they're the front page news for a week or 2 while they play out and the different parties involved figure out what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of not paying them. I wish that everybody would take that stance, but I personally had clients that have had to pay. The
Yeah.
reality is that if there are times when I guess they may need to, but the problem is when we pay them, of course, we are funding the enemy to attack
Who
us
are
more,
funding the
have
enemy. And
better
on the other
resources,
side of it
have
is,
more people.
yeah, you got pressures though to get your business back up and online. And so
Yeah,
you are spot on. You have got to be prepared the best you can. Now you can go do tabletops and all these other things. That's good to go do, but until it comes, you don't exactly know. But all of that stuff, you kind of get your house in order to some degree to go do it. And so I do. I'm a
yeah.
firm believer in that. So
It starts with a really good incident response plan, which everybody should have, and you
yeah,
should have exercised it, and you should have done tabletops, so that the first time you're trying out your incident response plan, hopefully, is not when you're having an incident, or God forbid, you don't even have an incident response plan and you're having an incident, because I've been brought in after the fact in a few of those as well, and it's, the problem is they have no internal expertise, so they're 100% reliant on people that are getting paid a lot of money to help them out, and,
and they don't know your infrastructure, and
yeah,
they don't know where it's stored, and they don't understand your vulnerabilities. Because once it's there, you know it's there. Then you try to find the package, but then you really try to do the damage assessment, and that's where it starts getting sketchy. Because how much information did they get out? How much whatever,
a
and
lot of
then that means the
speculation in that part
PII, it
often
means
too.
customer notification. That takes you down a whole litany of things, and sometimes you got to be realistic about what it is. So for us, I had an accounting team that loved to keep their spreadsheets for years and years and years. And every time I would say, well, we're going to have an electronic document retention policy. Oh, no, can't go do that. We need it all. And I kind of go, oh, I don't know. So they had years. I mean, they had probably 14, 15 years of files. on it. And my biggest vulnerability was that because the systems weren't really tightly integrated, coming out of HRIS, going into payroll, which wasn't integrated together, you would do a spreadsheet. And the key indicator field on that spreadsheet was, of course, your social security number. That being said, though, before I got there, they were passing the spreadsheet unencrypted. It would never be coded. It would never be. That was my biggest vulnerability. On the other, so that we need to protect, that's people, because this day and age, yeah, they want ransom to unlock your server. They want ransom for your data, but now they're also ransoming executive information. How much was he making? Things of that nature. And you don't want all that stuff to get out. But on the other side of it, so we had company financials. And all the lawyers were saying, well, what are you going to do about company financials? Aren't you worried about that getting out? And I kind of, you got to be rational about this. You kind of got to say, no. And they go, why? I said, everyone in the world knows we're basically a bankrupt company. Friendly's is one of those brands that everyone loves. Everyone has great memories. Everyone just loves the brand, but everyone knows it's on hard times. And so if there was to get out that, hey, we have no money, it's kind of like, so yeah, tell me something you don't know. So, and you do your risk analysis of what information did they get. In that organization, my finances weren't too important. Personal information was extremely important.
Yeah, and they'll come back in 40 days or less sometimes. I mean, you don't
Yeah,
have long, even if you do pay them, before they're right back at their same games. And I mean, I think that's another part that people don't get. I mean, you better be very quick to move and react and fix things, or you're gonna have one after another. My parents, every time I talk to them, it seems like they're telling me that their local hospital was ransomed again. And I know there's been like at least four different times it's been ransomed now. And I mean, being a cybersecurity expert, I know exactly what's happened. They're not learning their lesson
that's
each
right.
time and reacting strongly enough. So I guess
And you know, and 10 years ago, it was ransom and issues and so forth. But now there are companies, because they did not prepare, and you talked about startups in the beginning, that cannot recover and they're out of business. It
Oh,
is
yeah, and
just
a
that.
startup, I mean, they've got limited runway. I mean, a lot of startups are only running on a few months of capital, right, at certain times, and so if you were to take that startup that's already running very thin and has very little room for error, um, yeah, they could be under just like that. And I think a lot of them probably don't have that cyber liability insurance either, because like funds are tight. So where are you going to spend it? Are you going to spend it on insurance or on customer acquisition? And
Or building your dang on product. You know, you're there, you don't have enough
oh,
money
fair,
to put the
yeah.
product out. And so it's a tough decision for the leaders. But if they haven't at least given it 5-10 minutes thought, and to say at least
Hopefully more
lock
than
it
that.
down with the
Hopefully,
vulnerabilities of what they can go do. You know, so let's just say they got a Office 365 and a couple of servers. If you're not using it to the full capability that you're paying for, well, then that's kind of shame on you, right? And then, like I say, these guys, the threat is smart, but if you're using it to the best of your ability, it's fine. It's like, and a lot of times in cybersecurity, it's not what you know that you have trouble with. It's what you don't know what you have trouble with. So I went into one organization, and of course we always say, well, how good is your antivirus? Oh, it's good. So what's the percentage that checked in this week? What percentage is this? What percentage over 2 weeks old? Let me go pull a report out of it. So they pull a report together. They go, all right, they're over 2 weeks old. Lock them out of the network. Pass the ticket to the help desk. Get them to come in. Right. But then you ask the question, and you go, all right, when's the last time that we did this? The difference between what we have in antivirus and the assets we have in Active Directory. Yeah, that's right. Everyone always goes, Oh,
I'm guessing there was a giant gap in
of
coverage
course
there.
there is. Of course
There
there
typically is.
is.
I mean, that's one of those metrics you have to watch because I
You
mean,
do.
in fact, when it comes to my EDR, I care more about coverage than I do any other metric. I wanna
That's
know
correct.
how many systems are missing and why is it missing from them?
Why
Because
is
often then you're gonna find out, well, it's missing from this one because we're still running Windows 98. Well, wait, why are we running Windows 98?
correct.
Um, and
Yeah.
that's where that rabbit hole, or where you
Yeah,
you
why are we running it? Get it? Either it's a capital project because it's a server or something that you strategically need. You get it rewritten. Yep, I get it. It's a vulnerability. May not be the top order. I mean, part of the CISO's job is, a lot of CISOs, they kind of go in, they forget the certain thing, and the CISO will say, "Oh, we can't go do that security issue. Oh, I can't go do that security issue. Oh, I can't go do that security issue." And then you kind of got to look at it. I mean, you kind of sound like so hopefully I'm not offending anybody here. You kind of sound like a lawyer. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I said, if we used to laugh all the time in restaurants and in car rental, if you were a lawyer in a car rental company, you wouldn't have a car rental company because you got other people come on, they're renting your vehicle, they're going to crack them up, it's going to be risk and so forth in restaurants. Hot food could burn people, food poison, food allergy issues and things of that nature.
true.
People aren't vetted and so forth. You wouldn't have a dang on business. And so CISOs, they've got a big area. They've got to have the right tools to go do it. They may not have all the tools, but they have got to be able to measure and quantify risk
I think and communicate risk. I
and
think
communicate.
that,
That's right.
that's one of the biggest things that a CISO has to do is let the board know, okay, hey, this is, or the rest of the executive team, hey, here is our risk. Here's the what we need to be concerned about, so that the rest of the team can make
That's correct.
informed decisions about those things.
Right.
And when you're just saying no, we can't do that. In your example here, the problem is you're not helping the business's core mission. You're just getting in the way. And honestly, I think that it's our job to communicate risk more so than anything else. And from that communication, of course, management happens naturally. But I think it all starts with communicating risk before we even start trying to worry about mitigating that risk. Let's start by
Right.
communicating it, and you may be surprised at what options for mitigating the risk you learn about that you weren't even thinking about.
That's correct. That's right. Yep.
So let's talk about training people.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things that everyone I think wants to have better success at. And so one of the things I like to just dig into is what are some best practices that you've learned over the years to help make your training more effective?
Um, so the training that I like is organization training. I mean, there's training of the old internal team and security has got to be along with product development, implementation. I'm a firm believer and they are in the process and all the training of the new tools and stuff like that. But the best training I have is the organization training. It is uh, weekly emails going out, security bulletins, bulletin boards. There is also the bulletin board. There's also the penetrating email type things. Always subscribe to those and so forth. And of course, we're not really part of training, but pen testing and all those type things. And then the other thing is this is where your team, you got to build the culture in your team that you will get a person that goes, oh, I think I got a suspicious email. And then your team kind of says to you, well, Mary Lou has a suspicious email almost every day. And it turns out to be a false positive. And you kind of go, yeah. And that's when you know you have a culture problem because you in the IT world need to know that That person took time. That person doesn't understand everything, but they let you know. And so your culture has, we're going to run down to Mary Lou real quickly every day. And yep, set your watch, 8:05 every morning. You're going to run down there, but we're going to go down there. And then you're going to say, you're fine, it's good. And oh, by the way, thank you. And
Yes.
then you have got to champion this in a greater sense of our, we had this many security incidents, vulnerabilities, whatever, how you reported out this week. This is how many were false positive, negative, all due to training. Every one of you department heads in your staff meetings, 5 minutes talking about cybersecurity. And just don't do it from you can use my bulletins that we put out, and just don't do it from the organization point of view, but do it for their personal, for at home and so forth, that we start making this top of mind. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're not going to win. I don't want you to understand that. You're not going to have zero vulnerabilities, but you might be able to not get a 10% improvement,
Yeah.
a 12% improvement by this culture and by people saying security is important to us. Next time there are organizations threat assessments for legal and for your board and so forth, cyber's on that. It's kind of a little bit painful, but it's kind of good too. So
Couple of things there. Number one, I think pen testing should be a part of training, where you're getting that purple teaming happening for your red teamers. I'm sorry, for your blue teamers, so that they better understand how the attacks are going to come in, what to look for, things like that. But also within your staff, one of the things that stood out to me in my career was this time that I had tailgated in 4 consecutive years in a row off the same
yeah,
person, and how it never made its way to the individual who was actually in the report letting this happen. Because if even once he had been made aware of his mistake, it wouldn't have happened 3 more times, right? So I do think that there's also takeaways of, hey, we did a penetration test. You don't point at anyone, but maybe you tell the story about what happened. Because when it's when you can use real events that happened at your organization, it really does help to make it more real. And to that point about connecting it to their personal life, I think when we give people homework and we send them home and we tell them, "Hey, go teach your kids about this threat." And maybe we even take and look up something there, threats that are targeting kids on Roblox or something, and give them something specifically they can take home to their elderly parents or to their children. But what happens is when they go home and they're teaching their family about it, they become the expert at home. And it really does shift their mentality coming back into work. And so I think
yes,
that's one of the best things we can
yeah.
possibly do.
A
Um,
couple of
you
years ago when
oh,
two-factor
go ahead.
authentication, when two-factor authentication was rolling out, yep, you tell you got to do it, and most people are at first are going to be imposed by the extra step, and you kind of go, okay, and that technology has improved, but then you kind of say, if you do online banking at home, turn on two-factor authentication and protect your assets. They kind of go, ooh, I didn't look at it that way.
Do you have any
And
investment accounts? Turn it
that's
on
right.
there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. And it's a pain. I get it. And the technology is getting a whole lot better now with the authenticator apps and so forth. But when you start saying, "Yep, go do it here," and it's good, but oh, by the way, do it at home, then they go, "Oh, yeah," and then it becomes a way of life for them, and it's not they're not going to be happy, but there should be a little bit more tolerable because it is the way of life. And to your point, I think it's a great point too. Just start teaching the kids now,
Mhm.
two-factor authentication. Don't
Yes,
have a
they
choice.
are one of our most vulnerable, like, elements entering the workforce is the youngest people. It shouldn't be that way, and I think that we can start fixing that right now and make our future selves, lives easier a little bit easier, just simply by telling people to go home and take that knowledge home to their kids, because
Right.
that will, in a few years, be entering your workforce and working for you, and hopefully it has an impact on them while they're young, and they get that ingrained sort of gut reaction, if you will, the same as looking both ways before you cross the street. And in fact, on that point, I have this theory around uh, phishing, and it's not really just phishing; it's any social engineering attacks in general, and even some just human error, common human error stuff like using bad passwords, for example. But I have this theory, and it's so a sorry, give me 1 second to gather my words
No.
here. Okay, so if I'm going to go get a vaccination, what they do is they give me a weakened, uh, I guess, a weakened version of that virus. They inject it into my body, and it teaches my body in a way that's safe how to fight against that virus and protect myself against it. So I believe that's what we're doing with phishing simulations and really any simulation that we would run. This could even be tabletops. Because what happens is that when that user learns through the simulation that urgency and authority and other things like this are going to be used against them, and when they learn that tactic really well, they become much, much less likely to fall for it, and in fact, their gut, will trigger on it and say, "Hey, this is a threat," and people will often even move on.
Yeah, I had a couple extra minutes one time, and so yeah, and again, you hit it right, and also I would include in there your processes and procedures. So a lot of times we look at cybersecurity as just the computing systems and so forth, but I'll also say it's to your process and procedure. So how do you pay
Mhm.
someone? Is there the approval process and so forth? And so our CFO spoke at a conference, and so I downloaded that video of him speaking at the conference, and then I ran it through an AI generator, voice generator, and I said, "Hey, Mary, this is Todd. Now we're just got an invoice. There's an invoice coming in for XYZ. We need to pay that real quickly, and so forth." And then I didn't send it to her phone. I just sent it to his phone. And you start looking at it real quickly, and you kind of go, "Oh, that's the new threat."
Yeah,
So now you start looking at the deep fakes, you start looking at AI, you start looking at these things. And again, I honestly say it's an unfair fight. You got one guy, two guys, well, how big your cyber team is, and they're working really hard, and they got hundreds of systems they need to lock down. And you got the one guy on the other side just looking for one vulnerability to get inside, i.e., the accounts
yeah.
payable clerk.
And it's not one guy on the other side, it's millions of guys on the other side
And that's
constantly
right.
attacking you.
That's right.
Yeah, it really isn't a fair fight, but I think that is the reason that we have to get really good at the basics, and that is empowering our people, hardening our systems, hardening our networks, understanding what the are going to look like and what our vulnerabilities to them are. I mean, it's not just about the perimeter; it's also about well, assuming compromise once they are in. So we don't ever want that to happen, but let's assume it does happen and now look at different ways that the attackers are going to be able to move around our network or escalate their privileges. And so you have to look at that from all of those different perspectives to really understand what is my risk here and how do I protect myself against it. So we are actually running a little bit low on time here, but
Uh-oh.
before we wrap up,
Yes,
I
sir.
do want to ask you about your take on the age-old argument of carrot versus stick. So, what is your thought? If you could really only pick one, what would it be and why?
Oh, you made me pick one. Um, yeah, but you kind of heard me earlier, so I guess I would lean more into the carrot world, i.e., the training and rewarding people and trying to build a culture, which I kind of consider if you can build a culture with the carrot, it's a force multiplier for you, i.e., everyone in the organization gets 1% towards cybersecurity is much better than you having three people on your cybersecurity or whatever it might be. And so I'm more of that, but I'm firmly also convinced that you need to have. I'm going to break your question here, but you need to have a little bit of a carrot too, or maybe a little bit of a stick too. So one time I had a person go to Mexico, and so what does he do? He puts his laptop in the luggage. Okay, he comes back. And he said, "Oh, lost it, got stolen, and so forth. We don't ever do that again. Don't ever do it again." And so, it's bad. Now we lock it down and all just the issues we got to do to remediate a little bit there. And so then he does it again. And he puts the dang on laptop in there a second time. Yeah, I hate to say that, world, there are stupid questions and and so he did it again. And so at that point, I said, I warned you. I said, don't do it. You put vulnerability here is, let's go to HR. You need to be gone. Okay. I think I just lost your voice there.
Oh, I accidentally clicked.
That's okay.
I
Yeah.
While I was talking, I used my
Yeah.
hands and I got my
Yeah.
keypad right here. Uh,
Yeah.
but I do agree with you that there are times when you do have to utilize or resort to the stick. I
Yeah.
also think that it's often used far too much, and we resort to it too quickly. And the example I'll give is a 3 strikes and you're out policy. So you
Mm.
click on your first fish, you get remedial training. You click on your second one, you get double the remedial training. You click on your third, you get fired. But what's
Yeah.
your thought of a policy like that?
Um, I think they're coming. I think it is, but you've got to have the safeguards and the tools that the individual kind of understood that, yeah, I shouldn't have clicked it. I will also start looking at other organization type of approaches, like make sure, zero tolerance. And you say like, no, we're not going to let emails go into your inbox. Everything goes into junk, and you got to whitelist it. So if you're having to whitelist it at that point, and then you do it, and then you do it several times, whatever, yeah, you need to go home. So there's an organization element of this associated with it to help protect the entire base. And I'll go back to the accounts payable clerk, right? Clearly a phishing issue. Did she do anything wrong?
No, she did her job in that
She
case.
did her
And
job.
I think that's part of the reason we have to understand where we have vulnerabilities in processes so we can put
Right.
controls around that or mitigating controls around that.
That's correct. Yeah, and those type things. And then how are we sweeping? How are we checking for it? So, and again, we had vulnerabilities too, because we didn't have a lot of capital for the security tools and so forth. So, the carrot and the stick, it's a tough one. And I would tell you, you're going to run into some users. I hate to use the term, but you just like, how in the hell did you even come to work today? You know, and you just, I
I
mean,
will
everybody,
say I got an opportunity to speak to one of my chronic clickers not too long ago, and, she right away says, "Well, Laura hates me." That's our cyber coach. And I
yeah,
say, "Well, why?" And anyway, she proceeds to be like, "Well, I'm trying so hard, but, I keep, accidentally clicking on stuff." And I knew who she was because of how how much, she had clicked on. But I will say that it was mitigated not as quickly as most of the other users. It took a lot longer for her, but it was eventually mitigated, and what it taught me was that some of the people that click on everything, just it's their process, it's their way of doing things, and they just needs a little bit more time and the ability to fail on a few more of those simulations. So, my opinion is, yes, there are times when you do have to do things, but I really think that ideally, when somebody demonstrates a certain amount of susceptibility to a fish, we're gonna hit them or target them with a higher frequency of them to give them the ability to fail a bunch of times, but also give us the ability to, mitigate that risk in a timely manner. So I think there's
Yeah.
ways we can handle that as well, where, it doesn't have to be just, if we're doing the same thing for everyone, it's hard to
Yeah.
do when it's one size fits all. But if we're making it a little bit more unique to the individual, then I feel like we could just adjust it. Or even just if we have a high, medium, and low risk group or a chronic
Right.
clickers group, whatever it is, there's ways that we can do more there, I think.
But then also reward the behavior, and not the behavior of clicking, but
Yes,
reward the behavior of saying, hey, you failed this one, you failed 3 months in a row. Hey, you passed one.
yes.
We reward the guys that are always the best, but we say, how about the guys that greatly improve? Because that could be Mary Lou, that to your point is always clicking on stuff. She didn't click on it. Hey, Mary Lou, this is great. I used to like give out $25 Starbucks gift cards, whatever, to staff that does great things. Just a nice way of personalizing it. And you kind
I
of
like
go,
fishing tournaments.
yeah, and then you
Actual
go, thank you very much. I mean, I know it's not a lot, but here's a little gift certificate for you. I know you're trying, and I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And more importantly, the organization appreciates it. And it goes back to what is that culture doing that in the organization? Yeah, you got to work on the remediation side of it too. But if you can lay out the program of where people are improving, if you can lay out the program, we sent 100 emails and we had 20% that took it, and the next time you only have 15%. You got to champion that. You got to champion. Always look at it. Oh, by the way, it goes to junk. Don't look at the from. Look at the information as, do you recognize that the address on it and so forth. And then you slowly but surely. And then also you got to get into HR, new employee orientation. This is important to us. This is why it's important to us, as well as all the other stuff. Cybersecurity. What do you do? Help desk. And I love my help desk guide. I could never be on the help desk because 50% of the issues are user errors, but people call it. Hey, this is Mary Lou. I think I got a bad email. Hey, we'll be right down there. Thanks, Mary Lou. And yeah, 8:05, right on time. And but you just go, and it's not a silver bullet, but I always have my, as you manage, and cybersecurity is a tough one to manage. But I kind of always build out my KPIs and how do we do this month and so forth. Are we progressing in the right direction, and those type things, and that needs to be one. But you just don't champion that you're 100% safe, because you're not. You're champion that we are improving along the journey. Mary Lou, you are an important part of it. You do a great job for us in accounts payable, whatever, and you're doing a great job of trying not to open every dang on email you see.
Yeah.
Not everything is that special on sale this week. That you're not
And when we
supposed to get.
say and when you give Mary Lou that gift certificate, I think that's an area where we almost need to be like these social media influencers. Make sure everyone in the company knows about it, because I
Yeah.
want them working for that gift certificate next month that we give to them. And not only that, it makes Mary Lou feel good to be praised as the cyber hero this month, right?
It does. It does make you feel good to be praised, and you can't always do it. But it's the old adage: praise in public, condone in
Yeah.
private. And you just got to live that as the leader to go do it. I mean, half the job of a technology leader isn't inside the organization; it's actually outside the organization, espousing the importance of it. And a lot of times, I went into a lot of organizations. And the IT guys kind of sit in the back corner. They're the prickly guys. They are the guys that always say, "Oh, can't go do it. Don't got the resources. Don't got the money. Don't got whatever." Then I go in there and I kind of say, "Yep, true, true, true." But it's our job to figure it out. And when we do, it becomes a lot of fun, because you are the ones that will save this company. And that's actually what happened. Again, the last one was we started laying in a few systems, and they were the prickly group. They went into a meeting one time and says, "Yeah, we don't have that, but this is what we can go do." And the chief operating officer almost fell off his chair. He said, "Never heard that from this group before." And then a year later, we had laid in some systems that were generating revenue for the company, and it turned out to be 20% of the revenue. It's just enough to take us from not being profitable to being profitable. And the chief operating officer and the CEO lean across the table and says, "Why why we're positive? I kind of go, no, because I'm heads down running the thing and poop all over the place. And the reason we're profitable is because of IT. And so it's your same thing about security also goes for the IT team. If they start saying, we're not losers, we're not the ones always getting blamed, but we are now have a winning philosophy, it becomes a little bit easier. And they want to engage more in their job and in their position. And you go down to the person that goes down to see Mary Lou at 8:05 every day and say, yeah, I know it's a pain, but boy, you really do a good job of handling her. We had some tough customers, and I got a little Irish in me, and I don't have a lot of tolerance for that stuff, but I got a guy over there, my project manager, the guy's name was Joseph. He could just take some of the toughest customers and talk to them and get them going in the right direction. So every time a tough customer comes down, you don't play to your weakness, you play to your strength. Hey, Joseph, I need you on this one, buddy. You're good. He goes, okay. Same thing with security. You're good at handling Mary Lou, and you've done a good job of helping to change the culture in the organization. So just minor points, but still.
Awesome. Well, hey, Pete, thank you for joining me today. We're at time, but it's been a pleasure. And for everyone joining remotely, we will see you again Friday. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.